6th is the date that we don't care about and shouldn't. How dare you? Okay. How dare you?
Living
How dare
testimony.
you? Okay. Don't you? I mean, really? Okay. I hope that. I mean, I wonder if you would be that arrogant in front of the families whose lives have been ruined by that, and the officers who put their lives on the line.
I was there on January 6th as a congressional staffer.
If you lost a brother there, what would you do?
I'm not going to be gaslit. I'm not going to be gaslit by you or you. As someone who grew up in a house of law enforcement, my mother was a 9/11 first responder who survived on that day. I'm not going to be gaslit by you on who was harmed that day.
Harrison spent the whole panel saying back the blue. Then Abby Phillip asked, were Capitol police officers brutally assaulted on January 6th? He talked about ICE agents. He never answered. Welcome to the debate, Shays. Today we cover the $1.8 billion slush fund, the Kennedy Center Vanity Project, and the moment law enforcement loyalty got tested and failed. Let's get into it.
Sixth rioters may be on the brink. Sources tell CNN tonight that his allies are urging him to kill the $1.8 billion fund that intends to compensate people that he claims were wrongfully prosecuted. Whether the administration wants something in return for that, like, for example, immigration enforcement money, remains to be seen. But this comes as a federal judge just dropped a big surprise. She is reopening the IRS deal that sparked all of this. Now, you'll remember that Trump earlier this year sued the IRS for $10 billion over the leak of his tax returns. In exchange for dropping that suit, the fund was created and the agency was forever banned from investigating his family's past taxes. Now, after a bipartisan group of former judges urged her to investigate, this judge is demanding that Trump's lawyers actually prove that he didn't collude with his own government in order to reach a deal. It is such a clever arrangement to sue the government that you run in order to maybe get that thrown out and then get something else in exchange. But to me, it says a lot about the politics of this situation, that people in the White House, that Trump's allies are urging him, maybe even pressuring him to get rid of that whole $1.8 billion fund because it is so politically toxic and, in the words of some Republicans, frankly, immoral.
Yeah, as a conservative, it made me a bit uneasy. And a lot of common sense conservatives looked at that fund and they said, okay, this is an oddly arbitrary yet specific $1.776 billion that basically asks taxpayers to refund alleged victims of the government over the past. And the other problem is that it wasn't congressionally authorized, which is, in essence, that's a problem for checks and balances and separation of powers. But the accusations that this was meant for January 6th rioters or cronies of the president and his allies, well, not necessarily just that, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that there were no victims of the Biden administration, because there were, whether it was parents who were branded as domestic terrorists by the FBI, probed, prosecuted potentially for protesting radical curricula in the classroom, or traditionalist Catholics who were targeted by the FBI for simply having orthodox views on their religion, those who are praying silently. You know, there's a lot of potential victims who could ask for recourse from the federal government. And there's something called a judgment fund, which is what this was derived from. And that goes back to early founding America. So I agree that the price tag is exorbitant. And the fact that it sunsets in 2028 is suspicious, right? Because it's right as Trump is on the way out, which doesn't pass the smell test. But there are victims of the last administration who, yeah, I mean, they deserve recourse. They deserve potentially some sort of, appeal. And maybe that's not reparations.
Can I address that? I feel like the sidestep into the Biden administration, it's not a functional equivalent. I mean, this is where Americans, this is so easy for you not to do that. I'm not to pick on you, but these people beat up people, killed people, and beat up cops. What this is loyalty as an asset class. What this is the founding fathers were concerned that the king would sort of just, go run amok and use anything he could in order to control. What you have here, this isn't derived from the judgment fund because it's a political narrative fund. And it's weaponization, and where does it end? So then it's like, oh, I'm a victim of media misinformation. I want some money, okay? It also incentivizes people to commit crimes. So, I mean, I can appreciate your point of view, but we don't always have to try to find the functional equivalent. And this is pretty black and white. Where we are now with criminals they used to leave our judicial system and get back on the street with probation. Now they leave with a 401k.
Or your party just gives them back into the community because they have cashless bail, letting criminals go back and forth, terrorize communities.
The conservatives do as well.
In this city.
It's the system, but that's a broader system that we can fix. This is just doling out money.
Not your party.
This fund doesn't even have someone to monitor it.
To go to your overall point, you call it clever. I don't think it's clever. I think it's redressing a problem that was unprecedented. You have a situation.
The part that I said was clever was Trump suing his own government and having his own appointed Justice Department determining whether or not to actually oppose a lawsuit against the IRS or just drop the case so that he can get $1.8 billion.
We had the former Department of Justice under President Biden go after the leading candidate for president on the opposite side, who then happened to win in a landslide victory, who then oversees
after him for what,
the Department of Justice.
What was he gone after for?
And who's the president of the United States
What
today?
was he?
Did anything
in
stick?
your words,
Did
what
anything stick?
No, just let me ask you, what was President Trump prosecuted
You
for?
spent show after show.
Why won't you answer the question?
We all know what the charges were, but we all know.
You just won't say it.
It was BS. It was weaponization to the 10th degree.
But you can't just call it weaponization.
Insane.
You won't even say what it was.
We all know what the charges were. We all know what the BS charges were. It was political retribution.
Harrison,
it was political
seriously.
prosecution.
First of all,
the likes of which that the American people said absolutely not.
What was former President Trump
Abby,
at the time investigated for?
We all know what the FBI did to his home. We all know.
I think it's very telling.
We all know what the Department of Justice.
Let's start with the $1.8 billion fund, because the framing kept shifting, and the shifting was itself revealing. Trump's allies urged him to scrap it. Some Republicans called it politically toxic. And yet the underlying logic that people wrongfully targeted by the government deserve compensation was never examined honestly by anyone defending it. Tara Setmayer named it plainly: a loyalty asset class, a taxpayer-funded payout to people who stormed the Capitol, pardoned by the same president whose Justice Department created the fund, publicly celebrated by the man controlling who qualifies. The symbolic amount, $1.776 billion, was not accidental. It was branding, a patriotic wrapper around a political reward system. Whether anyone not aligned with Trump would ever receive $1 from, it was never addressed. Because answering that honestly would have required admitting what the fund actually was.
Substance of it is.
It's important to know that he's the president of the United States, and there was no charges that ever stood. Just because the investigation existed, that it is by definition political targeting. There was a reason he was investigated. It didn't, and you know what? It really didn't have to be that way. He was given on the documents cases. He was given many opportunities. Which was thrown out.
He was given many opportunities to rectify that before it got to that stage. And on January, and Harrison, just a second, on January 6th, it was actually the Republican Party who said, hold on a second. Can you let me finish? Can you let me finish my thought?
It's not.
On January 6th, it was the Republican Party who said that a criminal case against Trump was the way to hold him accountable. You know who said that? Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor. So now Trump goes and pardons a bunch of people who were responsible for violence on January 6th. Those people now are eligible for this fund. Many of them say they want tens of millions of dollars from the federal government in exchange for their prosecution, their trial by jury, their conviction, all of that. They want tens of millions of dollars from taxpayers. And even Republicans say this stinks to the high heavens.
I actually kind of respect Republicans, some Republicans, and I heard it a little bit in your voice for saying a little bit of that, sticking to what they consider to be those fiscal conservative roots. But I mean, it all stinks of what America knows about President Trump, which is that he has been the most corrupt president that America has ever had. You can look like that and look to the side. The data say so.
What data point?
Yes, polling data. I'm a pollster. We poll on these
polling
things.
data, subjective polling data.
No, that's not.
Give him specifics of data points that you raised.
He's the one that mentioned the data.
54% of America think that President Trump is corrupt, and that is from a survey of national survey of adults.
On the Biden family?
It was much lower. It was, I think it was,
Okay.
yeah, I think it was like 47%.
Do you not
and
listen
and
to the
before
oversight
that-
hearings?
Okay.
The
well,
web of LLCs?
Biden's not in power anymore.
Either
Let's
way,
focus on
So we're
Trump.
going to ignore what just happened before
Well,
the
let's
last 4 years.
let's just
Okay.
let me just put it this way.
Let's
We'll
move
get into some of the alleged self-dealing that's happening right now with Trump and his family a little bit later in the show. So we'll be able to litigate that a little bit later. But you know, the courts are speaking up right now about some of these things, and we just talked about this IRS situation, the settlement. There's also Trump slapping his name on the Kennedy Center, which is actually a much more black and white situation. The judge said the statute makes it crystal clear that the center is named for President Kennedy. Congress gave it its name. Congress can change it. Trump actually seems to acknowledge this and just seems to throw his hands up in this Truth Social post saying he's given Congress full responsibility for the operation, maintenance, and management of the Kennedy Center, which I'm not sure they relinquished at any point, but that is, yeah, that's what he says.
So if you
Harrison's defense invoked Biden-era targeting of parents and Catholics. Those concerns deserve proper legal examination through proper channels, not through a president suing the government he controls, dropping the suit in exchange for $1 billion fund with no congressional authorization, and installing loyalists to oversee who qualifies. The whataboutism was not a defense. It was a subject change wearing one as a costume. The IRS lawsuit received the least panel attention and deserved the most. A federal judge reopened the case and demanded Trump's lawyers prove there was no improper collusion between the president and his own Justice Department in reaching the settlement. A sitting president sued the government he controls, settled with the department he oversees, and a judge said, "Prove this was not manufactured. That conflict of interest requires no elaboration. It requires only honesty," which the conservative voice on this panel could not provide. The Kennedy Center was shorter, but equally clarifying. Trump tried to attach his name to a living memorial to an assassinated president. A federal judge ruled that the statute limits the building's name to President Kennedy, and only Congress can change it. Trump posted on Truth Social that he was returning the responsibility to Congress, as though graciously stepping back from authority he never legally held. Setmayer called it exactly what it was, a vanity project that desecrated a cultural institution. The court held the line. The administration moved on to the next test.
One, as someone who is a patron of the arts, who loves the Kennedy Center, who was heartbroken to see it destroyed under Donald Trump for this personal vanity project, and for him to desecrate a living memorial to John F. Kennedy the way he did, in a tacky way, like he always does. I'm talking now. Please, thank Harrison.
Just let her finish.
So I am really glad to see that a judge looked at this and said, absolutely not, because Trump violated the law. You had Congresswoman Joyce Beatty out there, who was the only congressional person on the board left over, because Trump fired everyone, and that's by statute, out there fighting for this. I was glad to see my friends over there, Norm Eisen and Katie Fang and those folks, taking this to court and winning. So, you know, I hope that the Kennedy Center is restored to the glory that it deserves to be in. And that's not, he didn't need to put his name on it to do it illegally. And also, there's a lot of other things that they did, the grift going on inside, what Richard Goodell did to the Kennedy Center, the permanent art collection that no one knows where that is. I mean, it's a mess, and I hope it's restored. Two other things I want to address. One, shame on you for saying January 6th is the date that we don't care about and shouldn't. How dare you? Okay. How dare you?
Living
How dare
testimony.
you? Okay. Don't you? I mean, really? Okay. I hope that. I mean, I wonder if you would be that arrogant in front of the families whose lives have been ruined by that, and the officers who put their lives on the line.
I was there on January 6th as a congressional staffer.
If you lost a brother there, what would you do?
I'm not going to be gaslit. I'm not going to be gaslit by you or you. As someone who grew up in a house of law enforcement, my mother was a 9/11 first responder who survived on that day. I'm not going to be gaslit by you on who was harmed that day.
You're not me.
It was not a great day.
Guys, just 1 second.
And we moved
Hold
on.
Hold on.
The nation has moved on from
Just 1 second, Harrison.
The nation has. And they realized
Harrison and guys, all right, I'm gonna just stop it for a second, because we just can't hear between the two of you yelling at each other. I just want to ask you a pretty straightforward question. This is getting to her point about the impact of that day on real Americans and on law enforcement. Do you acknowledge that on January 6th, Capitol police officers were assaulted and brutalized by the rioters who were there that
I
day.
acknowledge that it was a terrible day for our nation's history. What
Do you-
happened?
that's not the question that I asked you. Do you-
Yes.
okay. So you
That did
acknowledge
Why
that
is it
that
so
law
hard?
that law
Why is
enforcement
it so
officers.
hard for you?
No. Hold on a
Why
second.
is it so hard?
One-
Do you
one
not
second. Let me
acknowledge
let's just
the
get
fact
through
that
this.
This is
So you're
happening
the
every
answer
day in
is
America against
the
ICE
answer-
agents, against NYPD
so,
officers,
hey, all
and
I'm-
you guys completely ignore it.
Harrison, hey, all I'm
As
asking
someone who
is that if
defends cops
you
every
care
single day of
about
my
law
life.
enforcement officers who are ICE officers, who are beat cops, you should also care about
The
Capitol
same is true
police
for you,
officers
you,
whose
you,
lives
and you.
were forever
And I'm
changed.
just asking for.
I think that's the
It's a
same.
double
It's true for
standard.
you.
When
It
was
is
the
true
last
for
time
everybody
you
at this table.
talked about the brutality against our ICE
Hold on a
agents
second.
or men and women in law
We
enforcement.
talk about it
You
all the
don't talk
time on
about
this
it.
show. We talk
Abby,
about it all the
come
time on
on.
this
Can I
show.
just say
So
something?
let's
Consider the full picture assembled by this single panel. A president suing the government he controls to extract a settlement his own Justice Department approved. A $1 billion fund to compensate people he pardoned, overseen by loyalists he appointed, paid for by taxpayers who did not vote for any of it. His name on a building a federal judge said he had no authority to claim. And a question about whether police officers were beaten on January 6th, answered with a pivot to ICE agents. Each of these individually can be explained away. Taken together, they form something harder to dismiss. A systematic pattern of using government authority to benefit political allies, testing institutional limits until something stops them, and relying on defenders who will perform law enforcement loyalty right up until the moment the law enforcement in question is inconvenient to the narrative. Tara Setmayer has been saying this since before it was easy to say. She was there. She remembers what January 6th looked like from inside the building. And the fact that a conservative woman who was physically present that day cannot get a conservative panelist to simply acknowledge the injuries of the officers who were there alongside her, that is not a policy disagreement. That is a moral failure on camera. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the $1.8 billion fund will ultimately be dismantled by the courts? Or has it already served its political purpose regardless of its legal fate? And what does it tell you that Back the Blue now has an asterisk, applying to every officer except the ones who defended the Capitol? Subscribe to the debate, Chaz. We will keep asking the questions that keep getting answered with pivots.